Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Heather Deniston, and this is the Junk You Should Know show. And with me today is Sachin Patel out of Toronto, who is the creator, developer, brainchild behind the Living Proof Institute, which is a very cool thing that we're going to get to here shortly. But thank you for joining me, Sachin. I really appreciate it.
Heather, it's a pleasure and a true honor, and I look forward to an exciting conversation with you and hoping we can expand some people's minds so that they can incorporate the power of medicinal mushrooms and nature into their holistic health strategy.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, I will be perfectly honest, Sachin, of the 64 shows that I've done, the content in this is the least familiar to me. So I am looking forward to learning from you as well as my followers. And I sent you some questions and I'm like, I hope these are the right questions to get the information out. So if there's other stuff we should know, please just go ahead and tell us. I want to make sure we cover the subject as thoroughly as we can in the time we have allotted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be totally transparent with you as well. My love for mushrooms and fascination and passion for sharing them is relatively new to me as well. So I've been working with them clinically in our practice for the last year or so, and we've just seen such profound shifts in people's health that it's hard to keep it a secret. So I'm learning new things on a daily basis, and there's just so much to know. And this is really a frontier that really hasn't gotten much attention in, certainly in the functional medicine space, because it's something that we have a lot of unfamiliarity with. And we have a culinary experience with mushrooms, but many people don't have a medicinal experience with mushrooms. And there's just this amazing resurgence of energy and, research that's going in this direction. And we're finding out some really, really cool things every day. Some of our biggest global challenges, not just from a health standpoint, but from an environmental standpoint, can actually be resolved by mushrooms. So really, really fascinating stuff.
That's so cool. Now let's talk a little bit about your background. You, by brick and mortar, by trade, are a chiropractor, but you have released that when you turned 40. Did you say that? As far as let go of your license on that, and you've moved into the functional medicine space. So can you tell me a little bit about what your background is and what qualifications because I know you have a lot of layers to that.
Yeah. So here's. I'll give you my story in a nutshell. So I'm trained as a chiropractor. I bleed chiropractic, so you can't take it out of me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so it's one of those. It's the thing that I'm most proud of in my entire life, and I think it's the greatest gift that I could actually give to my family is my chiropractic philosophy and the lifestyle principles, and just the belief in the body that I learned becoming a chiropractor. About 8 years ago or so, I really started focusing mainly on functional medicine. So I got out of the structural side of chiropractic, which is only one component of chiropractic, and moved towards the lifestyle and mindset aspects, which are part of the chiropractic triage, if you will. So one of the things, or triad rather, so one of the things that I focused on is getting people to become their own best doctor, because I realized I can only get my hands on so many people, but with tools like social media, with tools like this interview that we're doing, we could literally share information that can help hundreds or thousands of people if we self-empower people. And people can't adjust themselves. So one way to self-empower them is by teaching them how they can eat, teaching them how they can think better, teaching them how they can engage with their environment better, teaching them how they can connect with nature, and teaching them how to use their body as a tool and as a resource and as a reservoir for healing to take place. And that way they're self-empowered and self-actuated. So that became my mission. Going into functional medicine basically allowed me to use chemistry as a way of getting people better faster. But ultimately we leaned on the body doing most of the work and us helping patients provide the right environment in order for that to happen. So last year I turned 40. I'll be turning 41 here soon. Last year I turned 40. My goal was always to retire my license. And I actually gave up practice a few years ago because I started coaching other practitioners. So having built a practice in the US and then moving to Toronto and building a second practice here and having 2 successful cash practices, I started getting a lot of people asking me how I did that. And I realized that, hey, I can help even more people if I help other doctors set up their practices successfully. And so not only can I help people within my community, but I could teach others how to help people in their community. So I kind of sporulated myself, to use mushrooms as a metaphor, and taught other people how they could do what I'm doing. And that way we could spread this message far and wide. So I retired my license because I wasn't seeing patients anymore. And it was one of those things I had my mindset on since I was 25. And so it was kind of one of those bucket list things for me. So now what I spend most of my time doing is training other functional medicine practitioners, chiropractors, naturopaths, acupuncturists, holistic providers, and teaching them a framework so that they can build and scale their businesses by leading with their heart, and teaching their communities how to actually stay out of their offices. So I teach, ironically, I teach businesses how to build their practices by teaching patients to stay out of their practices. So it kind of sounds like a backwards and convoluted strategy, but that's what's worked for us, and that's what's working for a lot of people around the world, because really as practitioners, it's our job, it's our role and our duty to keep people healthy, not necessarily wait until they get sick and then try to bandage them up. So that's what I do now. And like I was saying, mushrooms came across my plate just fairly recently, about a year or so ago. And I've always known about mushrooms, and I think we've all eaten mushrooms in our lives, but not really thinking of them past that, not thinking of them as a medicinal tool that we can use to actually help and regenerate the health of our patients. So one of the mushrooms that I use quite a bit in my office, and I'm sure we'll talk tons about this, is reishi. I've also myself personally used psilocybin mushrooms, which some people call magic mushrooms. I've consumed turkey tail mushroom, lion's mane mushroom. So there's a variety of different mushrooms that I use on a daily basis for a variety of different reasons. But once you go down this rabbit hole, you start realizing that there's so much more here. There's such a huge story that nobody's told us about, and the solutions to many people's chronic health issues are literally right under our feet, and nobody's really talking about it. So thanks for helping bring more light to this amazing topic.
Yeah, a couple of things that come up for me in that conversation. One is, I think there's probably other cultures who are doing the connection between medicinal mushrooms and health, optimum potential, are doing it better than we are right now in Canada and the US. And I am assuming, my guess and my little bit of research that I've done in preparation to talk to you was India, Japan. Are there other cultures that are doing this? We're kind of learning from them.
Well, in China, for example, reishi is considered a national treasure. So the Chinese, and in traditional Chinese medicine, their tools that they've used for thousands of years are things that grow in the ground, right? Yeah. What makes mushrooms so elusive and so mysterious is they're typically not there one day, and then under the right conditions, it could be rainfall and some sunshine and a little drop in temperature, and the next day you've got these like weird looking objects that are growing out of the ground, and you come back the next day and they might be completely gone. So they're very elusive, right? And mysterious. And you're just like, wait a minute, that wasn't there yesterday. And it's bright and beautiful and red in many cases, and fleshy. So it's so mysterious. And I think a lot of people are, they shy away from mushrooms. And I've walked in the woods by my house thousands of times, but I was never looking for mushrooms. But now that I'm looking for them, I see them everywhere, and they've been there this entire time, just, like I said, right under our feet, and doing their thing, making our world a healthier place. And there's so many properties that we humans actually share with mushrooms that make it even more fascinating for me.
The other thing, and we're going to just dig right into that subject. Well, first of all, I watched your live. You went on a little nature walk and you were poking at those mushrooms that blew out spores. Yeah. And I just thought, that's so cool. You're clearly passionate about it, and you're a good educator. So it's a nice combination for us to learn from you today. The other question I had is, you talked about two practices that you've developed, but now you have, I'm assuming you'll call it kind of the third. It's the Living Proof Institute. It's a functional medicine institute with a variety of different kinds of doctors there. Can you tell us a little bit about your institute?
Yeah, so we actually have two locations. One is in Cincinnati. That was the first practice I started, and the second one here in Toronto. So our practice incorporates not just functional medicine, but lifestyle medicine, environmental medicine, mindset medicine, food as medicine. So we have a holistic nutritionist on our team. We have chiropractors as our functional medicine leads on our team. We have a hypnotherapist on our team. My wife is on our team. She's a pharmacist. So we have like a variety of people that work on our team that, you know, help us deliver world-class care and kind of, you know, approach a patient's case from a variety of different angles. And in fact, like one of our team members is a high performance coach because, you know, once people get well, we don't want them just to, you know, be drowning at one point and now they're at the edge of the pool. We want them to get out of the pool and live this extraordinary life that they've now kind of created the baseline for with having good health. So, you know, really, I kind of look at our practice as a, not as a health clinic, but really as a personal development clinic. But in order to become the best version of yourself, you have to have good health. So most people who come to us, the lowest hanging fruit for them is going to be to get their health in the right place, because then your mind is working better. You're, you know, you're vibrating at a higher frequency. You're able to manifest and create things, whether you're a business owner or even an employee or a team member or a contractor. Like, if you can show up as the best version of yourself from every conceivable angle, I mean, you're going to be a huge asset to the human tribe. And that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build an army of really health conscious and influential people that are trying to change the world and make it a better place. And in order for people to do that, if we're trying to create a better world, we need to create an army of people that are thinking at a certain level, that are operating at a certain level, that are contributing at a certain level, and are, you know, kind of having that full human experience, which many of us these days don't have, because, you know, most people live in such a sedated state and they never really get to meet their fullest version of themselves. They'll never see the best version of themselves in the mirror unless they're actively working towards it. And so, you know, our focus is to really help people uncover that and reach that potential.
I love that. My favorite people in the world are optimizers and those who teach how to optimize. And so thank you for doing that, because you are a pioneer. I can see it's the direction people are going. Even medical practices are kind of going into that boutique model, so they can provide a more holistic type of approach. And so that is awesome. And it's such a great offering for folks who are ready to take it to that next level. So let's jump into the whole mushroom thing. It's interesting. Oh, by the way, I'm seeing people check on, say hello, and put your favorite medicinal mushroom in the comments. So I want to know what you're taking, and let me know what you think it's doing for you. Let's start a conversation. Let's start, you mentioned them a little bit, but let's just go through in a systematic way the types of medicinal mushrooms we're looking at, because that to me is just a little bit confusing, because it kind of seems like all mushrooms, but then there are some specific ones. Yes?
Yeah, so there's you know, a handful that are well researched and very well established to have a therapeutic benefit and can be taken safely for long periods of time. There's 5 that I take every day, and I actually just add them simply to my coffee. One is reishi. Reishi is known as a mushroom of immortality. The second one is turkey tail. So turkey tail is excellent for balancing the immune system. And the next one is chaga. Chaga grows on, you know, it's like a scab on dying birch trees. It's the immune system of the birch tree. I also take lion's mane, and lion's mane is excellent for brain health. It's actually one of the most powerful nootropics that's ever been discovered. And the 5th one is cordyceps. Cordyceps is excellent for increasing stamina. So if athletes want to increase their VO2 max, if they want to increase tissue oxygenation, and they want to increase their adrenal tone, then cordyceps is a great mushroom for that. So those are the 5 I take, and I take them in a powdered blend, and like I said, I add them into my coffee or warm beverage that I'm having, and it kind of adds an earthy taste, you know, but it doesn't radically change the taste of my coffee, and it's a simple way to get these powerful medicinal mushrooms into your daily routine. Certainly, you can take them in a capsule format, but I like adding them to my beverages because I do that every day, so it's easy for me to remember.
I think also the closer you can get to the actual food. So the minute you put something in a capsule, your body has to really work at it to get at it. I think, you know, so I love that you take it in a powder form, stir it into your coffee. Now, we're jumping ahead, but I know people are going to want to know sourcing. Like, does it have to be organic? Does it not have to be? You know, where do you kind of an expert in the field find yours, and what do you recommend for people?
Sure. So the coffee that I drink particularly has wild, organically grown reishi spores in it. So there's actually 3 different parts to a mushroom, and maybe we'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
So there's sourcing is very, very important, because even if somebody says organic, it can be grown in somebody's grow lab in a plastic bag, and it can be called organic. Organic just means that it's not sprayed with any herbicides or anything like that, or pesticides, But the thing with organic means that it doesn't necessarily mean that it was grown in a wild-crafted state. And so wild-crafted mushrooms, organically grown wild-crafted mushrooms, are far more revered because they're grown in soil. They're grown in nature, in the environment that they would normally be grown in. So the mushroom itself, just like a human, if you grow a human in a certain environment, right, it's going to have a certain pallor. It's going to have a certain level of resiliency. If you grow a mushroom under the perfect conditions, it's not going to be as resilient as a mushroom that's grown in the wild, right? Because plants, for example, that grow in the wild have to build natural defenses for themselves. They extract certain nutrients from the soil. It's a cornucopia of nutrition for them. So when mushrooms grow in the soil in their natural environment under their ideal conditions, then I think you're going to get a much higher quality product.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's not a big leap to just understand that if something is growing in its natural environment, it's going to be at its optimal potential, which means it's going to be bioavailable to you in the best possible way with the most possible nutrients. Hi, Mary Beth. Hi, Raul. Welcome to the show today. And so that's great. Let's talk about the anatomy of the mushroom. That wasn't even something I thought to ask. And so that would be great to know if there's things we should be aware of.
Yeah, so there's three main components to the mushroom, and I'll start with the spore because that's where all life starts. So the spore, in the case of like reishi, for example, it's like a shell with two walls. So there's enough nutrition in that tiny, tiny little microscopic spore for that spore to survive and then sporulate up to 10,000 years later. So many mushroom spores can survive thousands of years. They can survive, in the conditions of space, right, and radiation. And so long after humans are gone, mushrooms will still be here. Okay, so we don't have to worry about mushrooms not being able to be resilient enough to survive the next ice age or the next, meteorite crash into the planet. They will be here long after we're gone. And that ensures life. Okay, so spores then under the right conditions, just like a seed under the right conditions, will sporulate, and then the shell will open up from the inside, and what will happen is mycelium will start growing. Okay, so the mycelium is like little hyphae. They start growing, and it grows in all different directions. Okay, so it'll grow, in 3 dimensions, right? Like a root grows in 3 dimensions. It grows down, but it also grows outwards. Yeah. So that
is a mycelium like a root network then? Is that because if people aren't familiar with what that term means, is it the mushroom's version of a root network?
Right. So it's the root network of mushrooms. Okay.
Okay.
And then the next part of the mushroom, which is the part that we're most familiar with, is the fruiting body. So the fruiting body is what we see. So that's what erupts, from the soil or erupts out of the bark of a tree when the conditions are just right in order for that to happen. So the mycelium is always there. Okay, so even in the winter, even if you don't see any mushrooms, the mycelium is there. It's what's holding the soil together. And then when the conditions are right, after rainfall, let's say, or after rainfall and sunlight, if there's a slight drop in temperature, then certain conditions will cause the mycelium to then turn into fruiting bodies, and then these fruiting bodies will then give off spores. And after a few short days, depending on the species of mushroom, the mushroom will then be consumed by other pests and animals, and it'll dissolve back into the earth, and it'll start its own network of mycelium. So the spores will then be released. The spores can go all the way up into the stratosphere and go all over the world and be carried away by our winds and trade winds and stuff like that. And when again the conditions are right, the mushroom will the spores will then turn into mycelium, and the internet of the earth will continue to grow.
Yeah.
Mycelium, what's really interesting about it is that we refer to it as the lungs, the immune system, digestive system, and nervous system of the forest. So it's what connects all the plants together. So we're conditioned to think that nature is competitive, right? But nature is actually very cooperative. You just got to look below the surface. So if you look below the surface, you'll see this entire network of roots that shares information, that shares resources. certain species of trees can communicate information to their saplings and also share resources with their saplings through this mycelium network. So we call it the wood wide web. It's like the original internet. And it basically wraps around the entire earth. So even at the bottom of the ocean, below the ocean, there's, from what I understand, mycelium down there as well. So it connects everything on the entire planet. And it uses a branching architecture, which is the most successful type of architecture, and that's why you'll see it in all forms of nature. So you'll see it on a river delta, you'll see it how our lungs bifurcate, how our, how the blood vessels in our brains bifurcate, and you'll see it in tree networks, in root networks, and so you'll see it everywhere. You'll see this branching network. So mushrooms use that same branching network. And what's really fascinating about that branching architecture is that it provides a massive amount of surface area. And surface area is directly correlated to data storage. So when you have high amounts of surface area, you have high amounts of data storage capacity. So you can store a lot of information in a small amount of volume in soil, because it's all this branching and rooting network structure that's taking place. So I believe it's in a square cubic centimeter of soil, you have 8 miles of mycelium.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like so hard to even grasp that concept.
So we've got mycelium, we've got the fruiting body, and is there more?
The spore. So
the spore, mycelium, fruiting body, those are the 3 parts?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad.
And the most coveted part of a mushroom is typically the spore, because that has the lowest biomass. Right? The biggest biomass of the mushroom is going to be the mycelium.
I see.
So if you're ever shopping, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what the powder you put in your coffee in the morning, what does that come from?
So the coffee that I drink actually already has reishi spores in it. Reishi spores are difficult to find, so this coffee already comes with it in it. The blend that I use is from a company called Harmonic Arts, and it's basically a water extract and alcohol extract of those 5 different mushrooms I mentioned, and they put it into a powder form so that it's easy to add to your soups or other beverages that you might be consuming.
And this may be kind of a silly question, but are they, when they put it into a powdered form, is it the fruiting body primarily that they're using, or are they also using mycelium and spores and?
Sometimes they'll use a combination. Usually spores are not always used unless they're processed in a certain way, because spores, if you think about it, spores are meant to go through you. So, that's how the mushroom propagates, right? That's why you'll see a mushroom growing on a cow patty, right? Because it ate the mushroom and the spore went through it, and the cow patty was a perfect environment for the mushroom to bloom. So spores are meant to go through us. So if you're going to use a spore, you want to make sure that it has a double crack process to open up that shell wall so that you can actually get the nutrition out of it.
Okay, you just taught me something about cow poo. That's awesome. Thank you. Hey, I want to say hi to Barb and Raul and Vanessa. Vanessa is sipping reishi mushroom. I think she said cocoa or something along those lines. And Raul Sachin is the herbalist from India that I mentioned, and he says namaskar to Sachin and Heather. And Raul, we already talked a little bit about perfect conditions for mushrooms. You said it needs rain, it needs sun, or a combination of the two, and it's kind of like it's like Christmas, actually, when you walk and you're like, oh, there's one, because you said it's gone the next day, or that. I just think that's so fun and so interesting.
Yeah, so timing, if you're going to time mushrooms, then typically here in Ontario, a good time for mushroom hunting is April, and also in the fall. And you'll find under certain conditions that a variety of different mushrooms grow. It's good to go into second generation forests where there's dying trees, or trees that have fallen over, because that's usually where you're going to find a lot of mushrooms growing, because they usually are responsible for decomposing that tree back into soil. And so when it rains, and if it's sunny the next day, and there's a slight drop in temperature, what the mycelium is going to do is it's going to release carbon dioxide, and it's going to inhale oxygen, just like our lungs do. And then that's going to provide the 4 perfect conditions in order for the mushrooms to grow.
That's fantastic. One other question Raul had for us, just I want to catch him before he goes, is how do you teach people about understanding when they're out in the forest what poisonous versus non-poisonous, dangerous, edible, non-edible? Are there some tricks for that, or do you kind of just have to know?
Well, here's what I do. I actually don't eat any mushrooms that I find wild unless I'm absolutely sure of what they are. So the only wild mushroom I've personally eaten that I've harvested was a lion's mane mushroom. And it's just this, looks like a beard growing off of a tree. It's got this, it's like this white beard, and they call it a lion's mane mushroom. So that's really, really good for your brain health. And so that's, I brought that home, we chopped it off, we cooked it up. We do get a lot of polypore mushrooms. So polypore mushrooms are ones that actually grow on the tree bark itself. And those would be things like reishi or red-belted polypores, or you might see like Fomitopsis mushrooms. These are birch polypores. And so those are medicinal in property, but I don't make teas or anything with them. I just enjoy them for their beauty. And sometimes I'll pick them and I'll dry them out and I have them in my meditation room. But I personally don't eat or recommend eating wild mushrooms unless you know what you're doing. So one of the things that I'm planning on doing this year is I'm going to actually hire someone to take me on a hike to help me find edible mushrooms so that I can get more familiar with this. So like I said, this is something that's, relatively new to me. There's people that have been doing this for years that are highly, highly intelligent and kind of know their forest really, really well. So they know what to look for and what to pick and what to eat. You can also get mushroom hunting guides. Like you can buy books that can help you in identifying the mushrooms. But this day and age, like mushrooms are so readily available in our health food stores. I just rather stick to products that I'm certain I know are good for me and that I can have predictable and consistent consumption of. Because consistency is also very important with the consumption of mushrooms, and that's why I know Vanessa's drinking her mushroom hot chocolate. If we can incorporate mushrooms into delicious drinks that we consume on a daily and regular basis, then we're getting this consistent software upgrade that the mushrooms are providing to us. So consistency is also very important.
Okay, I didn't know that. So can you say a little bit more about that? Is there a dosage or a sort of a frequency that you advise patients on?
Well, I mean, everyone's different, so it's hard to make like a blanket statement, and everyone's body's a little bit different too. So if somebody has, specific immune challenges, or they're under the care of a healthcare provider, then you might want to like double check with your healthcare provider. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. But like the mushrooms that I consume, there's really no known toxicity levels, and I'm consuming about 5 grams total of these different mushrooms a day. So these are, kind of on the lower end of they're therapeutic doses, but they're on the lower end, right? If I were to develop some sort of chronic degenerative illness, then I might increase the frequency. So instead of taking 1 teaspoon a day, I would probably up it to up to 3 teaspoons a day. But you always want to check with your doctor, because these can be very powerful immunomodulators. And so if you're already taking stuff for your immune system, or if you have challenges with your immune system, then I would certainly, just double check with your healthcare provider.
Okay, that sounds good. And is there any danger, like does anybody have to be worried about taking too much? Is there any kind of toxicity levels with this kind of thing?
Not that I'm sure there are. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I would imagine you'd have to take a lot. Like you'd have to be purposely like trying to injure yourself, I would imagine, taking capsules and capsules, or like spoons and spoons of powdered mushrooms. So I've never encountered that. Some people might get an upset stomach if they consume mushrooms. Some people have an allergy to them. That does come up infrequently, but it does come up for some people. We just had a patient of ours, he would take the mushroom spores and they would upset his stomach. And, so some people, they just don't tolerate them well for whatever reason. So it's always best to, start on the lower end and then increase the dosage as you see fit. And what I found historically is that people will, anytime you start consuming mushrooms for whatever reason, and I don't have a scientific explanation for this, I feel like people are just better in tune with their bodies. Something happens to their consciousness and their self-awareness levels. And we see this over and over again. Something happens, there's a switch that goes off, and we call this a software upgrade. Kind of like, if your phone is kind of running a little slow or your computer's running a little wonky, You can upgrade the hardware or you can upgrade the software, right?
Yeah.
And our traditional approach with nutrition has been to upgrade the hardware. What mushrooms provide is an upgrade in your software. So they're upgrading the information that your body's getting, not just the nutrients that your body's getting. So we can see pretty dramatic shifts in people's health in a very short period of time. Like we had a guy who's a client of ours, and we put him on a protocol that includes reishi mushrooms. And within 7 days, he went from taking 120 units of insulin a day to taking 0 units of insulin a day,
wow.
right? So that's going to be because his entire nervous system is working differently, not because of one thing that we gave him, right? And one of the things that reishi is known to do is it's a tonifier of the central nervous system. So we call it the Snoop Dogg of mushrooms. It just chills it out. And when you can get people into a parasympathetic state, then everything that's required for them to heal starts working better, right? Their liver starts working better, their kidneys start working better, their immune system starts working better, their sleep improves, their inflammation starts to go down, digestion gets better. So, it's amazing what can happen in a short period of time for people. And once that intuitive faculty increases, then people can adjust their dosages based on how they seem to be responding.
Yeah, that's great. When I was doing some reading, what it said was antioxidant benefit, increased immunity, improved brain health, decreased blood sugar, over response to insulin, and then exercise performance. Now, those are just kind of hard and fast. I like the way you just described it in that it has a much more global and holistic reach than just those 5 criteria. So keep that in mind, followers. Do you think I represented that appropriately?
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is that, a true cure, and this is what we're all looking for, right? We're all looking for and hoping for that one day we'll find a cure that fixes everything.
Yeah.
Right? And when you look at the global reach of mushrooms and how it impacts virtually every system in your body, because reishi specifically impacts your central nervous system, which then secondarily impacts every organ system and cell in your body, you can see some pretty dramatic shifts taking place in people. And it's almost like sometimes I have to remind myself not to make too many, even though these are substantiated, peer-reviewed claims that I can make, I have to remind myself not to make too many claims because then people will stop believing me, even though that's what they're looking for. And the true cure, any cure that we call a true cure, will fix everything. It won't just fix one thing, because that's not a cure, that's a medication, right?
Yes.
A true cure will provide an opportunity for the entire body to heal.
Yeah.
Because, if you improve cellular health and if you improve nervous system function and you improve lymphatic function and elimination, there isn't a single system in your body that isn't going to benefit in a positive way. And so virtually every disease would benefit from your body being from a sympathetic dominant state into a parasympathetic dominant state with this upgraded information coming into it.
Well, and I love that you just touched on the fact, because the one thing I didn't mention was detoxification, which is such a buzzword right now. Cellular detox is huge. And what you're explaining is by the very nature of how it works in your body, it's not specifically going after your liver and detoxing, it's making everything work better so that your natural innate ability to detoxify, cellular regeneration, clean up, free radicals, all of those things are going to work better by the very nature of the fact that mushrooms are making you operate on a higher level.
One of the things that I mentioned was that the mycelium is the lungs, the neural network, the immune system and digestive system of the forest. Now, one of the things that what I didn't get around to saying was that if you look at the mushroom itself, when it starts to fruit, that's a transformation. So what happens is you're taking dead matter and you're turning that dead, rotting, plant matter, and you're turning it into a medicine, essentially, right? Or you're transforming it into something else. You're taking hydrocarbons and turning them into carbohydrates. So there's literally a transformation that takes place. And so that's basically a detoxification process, right? So fruiting bodies, if you look at the fruiting bodies of Ganoderma lucidum, which is reishi mushroom, it looks exactly like a liver. It's red, just like a liver. If you turn it on its side, it looks exactly like a kidney, right? And there's something called Hox genes, and these are genes that we share with plants and mushrooms, where the form, the way an organ looks, right, and the way a plant looks they share data, they share information that provides that three-dimensional structure to that plant and to that physical, organ in your body. So it's not a coincidence that reishi is one of the most potent liver detoxifying and kidney detoxifying mushrooms, and it looks exactly like a liver and a kidney. So, and lion's mane, for example, if you cut open lion's mane and split it open, it looks exactly like a brain.
Interesting.
Every single organ in your body looks exactly like a mushroom. So if you look at your pancreas, if you look at your lungs, if you look at your brain, if you look at your liver, your kidneys, your sex organs, they all look like mushrooms. If you look at my finger, cordyceps looks like my finger, right? It's just a little, so you're basically a walking mushroom, whether you like to believe that or not. And we share, we actually share 50% of our DNA with mushrooms. So there was a kingdom that divided many millions and millions of years ago. So there was Animalia and fungi. So fungi turned into the mycelium and mushrooms as we know them, and then the Animalia kingdom turned into all the animals that you see. So without mushrooms, we wouldn't exist as a species. And what's also interesting is they breathe oxygen just like we do. So they're susceptible to the same viruses and threats to their cells as we would be. And that's why fungal pathologies in humans are so hard to kill, because fungal cells resemble human cells. So when somebody has a yeast infection and we give them, antifungals, they don't feel really good, because we're also killing our own, to a degree, our own healthy cells in our body, because we have similar genetic makeups.
Oh my gosh, that is very interesting. I didn't know that either. Listen, you have covered some great ground today. I want to ask, did you put that painting behind you intentionally because it looks like a bunch of spores?
I went to my friend's place, Giovanni. He might be watching this, but he's got a place called Elements Wellness Center. And it's cryotherapy, it's float tank therapy, it's community healing. There's infrared sauna there. They do all kinds of cool stuff there. And so I went there, and he's got a bunch of paintings on the wall and in his office, and they're all for sale. There's an artist there that sells them. And this one in particular didn't have a price tag on it. And I saw it, and I just right away fell in love with it. And I'm like, how much is that one over there? Because I don't see a price tag on it. And he's like, damn it, I was trying not to sell that one because I love it so much. And I went there and I picked it up from him. But it does kind of look like,
I know. It looks like a spore explosion. And maybe that's why I love it.
All right. Well, that's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it explosion.
I love it. Well, listen, Sachin, thank you so much for being with me today. We have had some great interaction. I've been watching the notifications and people viewing. We've had some really good folks who have been watching live. Thank you. And for those of you watching in replay or on the Well Fit and Fed YouTube channel, thank you as well for joining us to learn about mushrooms. I know I got a major mushroom education, and I'm sure you guys did too. And so we will be posting some stuff down below, the different types of mushrooms, some different, I'm going to put a couple different products down there under Sachin's recommendation, and so that you can get started if you are enthusiastically inspired by what we've talked about today. So thank you so much, Sachin, for joining. We're going to sign off unless there's anything else that you think we can't live without knowing about mushrooms.
Well, here's what I'll tell you, and thank you so much for this amazing interview and the opportunity to share with your community. I really appreciate it. And here's what I'll say. When you start looking for mushrooms, it makes your walks in the forest so much more pleasant. It's such a fun experience. And get your kids, if you have young children or even older children, get them interested in this, because there's some really, really cool things that are coming down the pipeline. And I truly believe that mushrooms are going to be our saviors. And if you want to look into this a little bit more, I suggest YouTubing Paul Stamets. He's probably the world's leading mycologist. And just look at some of the fascinating work that he's doing, because if you're in the healthcare space, this is an area that you definitely want to keep your eyes on. And because there's going to be some really fascinating things coming up. We didn't get into, psilocybin mushrooms, which are magic mushrooms, but they're extremely powerful in healing the brain. So there's actually a patent that Paul Stamets has, and he reverses Alzheimer's degeneration in the brain by using psilocybin mushroom, lion's mane mushroom, and niacin. So he owns that patent, and so this knowledge is becoming more and more available to us. And like I said, we came from mushrooms. We'll die and turn back into mushrooms. So we may as well enjoy them in between, because we know that they can make our lives better. And It can make your walks in the forest more pleasant, more exciting, and more engaging, and it just brings you into that space. And there's just this bewilderment when you find mushrooms, and this relationship that develops over time, and you just start to become mesmerized by them. So if you're tuned in, if you enjoyed this presentation, like, don't let it stop here. Keep looking. Go out into the woods when the weather is appropriate. And you know, you, Heather, live in the best place in the world for mushroom hunting, which is the Pacific Northwest. So make sure you're getting out into, that's like on my bucket list, to come out there in April or in the fall and do some mushroom hunting. So maybe I'll see you out there.
Absolutely. And I didn't share this, but my husband has, we have a friend, and they go mushroom hunting every September, and they bring home hundreds of dollars of big, in fact, I'm going to post the picture of the one that he has. It has a head like, so, wait, you can't see me, like so big on it. It's incredible. And so I'll post that just for fun down below, but absolutely. And I feel so inspired to go check that out too. I hope all of you followers do as well. So thank you again, Sachin. It's been just a total pleasure. We will say a little goodbye to everybody watching, and tune in again to the Junk You Should Know show. It's every Friday at noon PST.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.